Welcome to the Spider Tales channel. If you're new to the channel, subscribe so you don't miss any of the insane stories I bring here. My parents favored my twin brother until they decided that my wife should be his. I couldn't take it, and... The S. Favorite twin. Since I was little, my parents have always shown a clear preference for Lucas, my twin brother. While I strive to be recognized, he always received the praise and privileges. At first, I thought it was all in my head, but as we grew up, it became obvious. For them, Lucas was the perfect son, and I, just a mistake on the way. But the situation reached an unsustainable level when years later, after I married Helena, my parents began to act in a disturbing way. They simply decided that my wife was more suited to Lucas and began to hint that perhaps it would be better for everyone if Helena and I separated so that Lucas took the place of husband in my life. This was not only a blow to my relationship, but to my dignity. I was determined to cut them all out of my life. The first signs it all started subtly. At the beginning of my marriage, I noticed that my mother, Christina, always praised Helena in a strange way. She has a strong, mature profile, something that suits someone like Lucas better. I thought it was just an unintentional comment, but then came the looks, the insinuations, and the evil smiles when Lucas and Helena were in the same room. Once, at a family dinner, my father, Henrique, said, "Lucas always had a more stable way. Don't you think, Helena?" She laughed uncomfortably. "Ah, I like my husband exactly the way he is," my mother intervened. "Of course, honey, but sometimes people find out they made the wrong choice when it's too late." Helena frowned. I clenched my fists. That wasn't right. Their plan, the insinuations turned into actions. One night, Lucas showed up at my house with a bottle of wine. He said he wanted to talk to me about an important matter. "Our parents don't think you have the right skills to take care of the family, man." My patience was already short. "And what does that mean?" He took a sip of the wine and smiled. "Maybe it would be better if I took on that role." I crashed. "What the fuck are you talking about?" "Think about it, brother. You've always been the rebellious, impulsive guy. I'm more centered. The parents think that Helena and I would make a more solid couple, you know? What's the harm in thinking about that?" I got up from my chair, furious. "Is this a joke? You think you can just come into my house and say this nonsense? Helena is my wife." Lucas shrugged. "Yet," I punched the table. "Get out of here before I break you." He laughed and calmly finished the wine. "Relax, bro. We're still going to talk about this a lot." That night, I didn't sleep. Helena discovers everything. It didn't take long for Helena to realize that something was wrong. "Why does your mother keep calling me so much?" I sighed. "They want you to stay with Lucas." Her eyes widened. "What?" "That's exactly what you heard." Helena turned red with anger. "That's sick, Marcos. Your family is completely insane." She started ignoring my mother's calls. But that only made things worse. At a Sunday lunch, my mother, without a hint of shame, said in front of everyone, "Honey, if you ever realize you made a mistake, know that our family will take you in, especially Lucas." Helena stood up indignant. "Dona Cristina, with all due respect, you are completely out of touch with reality. I love Marcos. I chose him." My mother sighed as if disappointed. My father shook his head and said, "What a shame, but we won't give up on you, Helena." This was the last sign that something even worse was to come. The frame. Just when I thought nothing could get worse, the unthinkable happened. My mother came up with a plan to try to separate me from Helena. First, rumors spread among our friends that I was cheating on Helena. Afterwards, Lucas showed up at our house drunk and tried to kiss her by force. When she told me I lost control, I ran to my parents' house and punched Lucas in the face. "Never go near her again, you sickman!" He fell to the floor, laughing. "You're exaggerating, little brother." My parents didn't do anything. Not a scolding, not a disapproving look. On the contrary, my mother sighed, frustrated. Now you behave like a savage? This only proves that Helena made the wrong choice. It was there that I realized. To them, I had never been part of the family. I was just an obstacle to Lucas getting what he wanted. The final cut. That night, I returned home determined. Helena, from today onwards, we no longer have a family. She held my hand, understanding everything. You're right, Marcos. It's already crossed the line. We blocked my parents and Lucas from all forms of communication. When they realized I cut them off, they started spreading lies on the internet. They said that I had abandoned the family and that Helena took them away from me. But it was already too late. I didn't need them anymore. The years passed. We built our own family, away from the poison of my parents and my brother. I learned that family is not who has the same blood as you. Family are the people who respect you, support you, and never treat you as a second option. And finally, after a lifetime of being rejected, I was at peace. The return of the ghosts of the past, the silence that Helena and I achieved was short-lived. After months of no contact, my parents reappeared. It was not a simple attempt to get closer. They appeared out of nowhere, sending me insistent messages and calls, accusing me of being the destroyer of the family. One night, when I got home from work, I found Helena tense in the living room, holding her cell phone. Marcos, your mother just sent me an absurd message. I picked up my cell phone and read Christina's message. Helena, I know you still have a good heart. Don't let yourself be manipulated by Marcos. He was always selfish. He was always jealous of Lucas, and now he's destroying our family. We just want to talk. Don't ignore us. You have the right to know the truth about him. My muscles tensed. I took a deep breath. They're trying to turn you against me. And it's the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my life. Helena held my hand. Marcos, I will never fall for that game. But I knew this was just the beginning, the confrontation. The next day, I was surprised in my work parking lot. My father, Henrique, was there, leaning against the car with his arms crossed, my stomach turned. What the hell are you doing here? He looked at me like I was a huge disappointment. Aren't you ashamed, Marcos? Ashamed of what? For having destroyed this family. I crossed my arms. Ah, now I'm the destroyer? Weren't you the ones who wanted my wife to stay with my brother? He snorted. You were always selfish. I always wanted to compete with Lucas. I always wanted everything for you. I let out an incredulous laugh. Compete? How could I compete if you had already decided that he was the perfect son? Since I was a child, everything I did was insufficient. You always favored him. You always treated me like a nuisance. My father didn't blink. And you think that justifies abandoning your family? You're no longer a rebellious teenager, Marcos. You're an adult man. You need to learn to forgive and return to your family. Family? I took a step forward. Tell me, Dad. At what point in my life did you treat me like part of the family? When you ignored me at every party? When you praised Lucas while I was always second place? Or when you tried to steal my wife from me? My father sighed, closing his eyes as if he were dealing with a stubborn child. You distort everything. You always have. No, Dad. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing everything clearly. His voice got harder. Well then, see this clearly. You will still come back to us. You will understand that you are wrong. And when that happens, I hope there will still be a place for you in the family. I approached, looking into his eyes. I will never return to this family again. And I left. The final frame. The attacks did not stop. Unable to reach me directly, my parents began to spread lies about me to their relatives. Suddenly, cousins, uncles, and even family friends started sending me strange messages. Marcos, what happened? Your mother said you left because you had psychological problems. Dude, I heard you left your family for money. Is that true? Your mother said that you were poisoned by Helena, that she took you away from everyone. They were doing everything. They could to flip the narrative, but I didn't fall into the trap. I just replied, if you want to know the truth, ask me directly. If you prefer to believe them, then good luck. Few had the courage to ask directly. The majority preferred to believe my parents' version, and I realized I didn't need them either. The last blow. The final blow came a few months later. Lucas was engaged. My parents announced his engagement as if it were a national event. They made a point of inviting me, even though they knew I would never go. The surprise came the day after the engagement when I received an email from my mother. Marcos, we know you must be feeling left out, but we want you to know that Lucas is finally where he was always supposed to be. He will be the son we always dreamed of. And now, we have decided to make a final decision. You are no longer part of this family. For us, you are officially disinherited. We don't want any more contact. You made your choice, and now we make ours. I read that and smiled. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. They had finally admitted what I had known for a long time. I was never part of that family. And finally, I was free. The new lifetime passed. Helena and I built our own lives, surrounded by people who really cared. I learned that family is not a matter of blood, but of respect. My parents could officially disinherit me, but in reality, I had already disinherited them a long time ago. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt complete. The return of the lost brother. The years passed, and I never heard from my family again. It was a comfortable silence, a weight lifted off my shoulders, until one rainy afternoon my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Hello? The silence on the other side lasted a few seconds before a familiar voice spoke. Marcos, it's me, Lucas. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard my twin brother's voice in years. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. What do you want? I wanted to talk to you. Can we meet? I thought about refusing, but something inside me wanted to understand what he had to say. Where? At that cafe near the center. Tomorrow at 3? It's okay. I hung up without saying anything else. The conflict. The next day, I arrived at the cafe 5 minutes before the scheduled time. Lucas was already there, sitting, playing on his cell phone. When he saw me, he smiled. It was a smile I knew well. The same smile he used to calm any situation, to make people like him. But it wouldn't work for me. I sat in the chair in front of him and crossed my arms. Speak quickly. What do you want? Lucas sighed, putting his cell phone aside. Marcos, I'm sorry about what happened. I know things were tense between you and our parents, but it's been so long. Don't you think it's time to put this behind you? I let out a humorless laugh. Leave it behind? You have no idea what I went through, do you? I know our parents made mistakes, but what, Lucas? My tone came out harsher than I intended, and I saw Lucas swallow hard. But they're our parents, man. Don't you miss them? I leaned forward, closing my eyes. You never went through what I went through, Lucas. You never were treated like second place. You never had to see your own parents wanting to give your wife to your twin brother. You never had to hear that you weren't part of the family. So don't come here and play peacemaker. Lucas pursed his lips. You're so bitter, Marcos. And you're so naive. Silence settled between us until Lucas took a deep breath and said, They miss you. I laughed again. Ah, do you? Do you miss someone to control? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Lucas scratched the back of his head, looking uncomfortable. Marcos, look. Our parents are already getting old. Time is passing. If you don't reconcile with them now, it might be too late. Those words hit me in a strange way. For a moment, I thought about the possibility of one day receiving news that one of them had died. How would I react? But then I shook my head. If it's too late, it's because they chose it that way. Lucas looked me in the eye, and for a second I thought he was going to insist, but he just sighed and shook his head. Okay, I tried. He got up, took out his wallet, and threw some bills on the table to pay for his coffee. Before leaving, he turned to me one last time. I just hope that one day you won't regret it. And he left. I stood there, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of me. But I didn't regret it. I was free. Reflections. Among friends, that night I went out with my friends to a quiet bar. After the meeting with Lucas, I needed to vent. We sat at a table away, with a good view of the street lit by the city lights. I ordered a beer and bluntly began. My brother came to me today. João, one of my oldest friends, raised his eyebrow. Lucas, what did he want? Saying that our parents miss me and that I should make peace with them. Everyone at the table was silent for a moment, until Diego, always direct, said, "And you told him to fuck off, right?" I couldn't help but smile. In a more polite way, but yes. They laughed, but John shook his head. Man, I know family is a complicated business, but sometimes it's worth leaving the past behind. I sighed and looked at him seriously. But what past, João? Have you heard what my family did to me? Have you seen how they always favored my brother? How they treated me as if I were a burden? How they wanted my own wife to be theirs? This is not normal. Pedro, who was always the most observant, intervened. Do you know what the problem is? Society always pushes this idea that family is everything, that we have to forgive because they are blood ties. But no one talks about the damage that toxic families can cause. Absent. Exactly. And the worst thing is that those on the outside always think that the problem lies with us. Because in their minds, parents never make mistakes. But they do make mistakes. And they make bad mistakes. I think the worst thing, said Diego, is that when we cut off relationships, we still feel guilt because we've been conditioned to think we owe them something. I was silent for a moment, taking a sip of my beer. And that's what bothers me. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if I should miss them. But when I remember what I went through, the answer always comes, no. I don't owe them anything. João sighed and lifted the bottle. So let this be a toast to freedom. We only have one life, and we can't live carrying the weight of people who don't value us. Everyone raised their bottles and we toasted. At that moment, I realized that, even without my blood family, I had built my own family with those friends. And that was what really mattered. And that was today's story. What did you think of it all? Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. See you next time. Bye.